Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street partners with businesses, organisations, unions and social democratic parties across the globe to develop community organising strategies, train leaders to build power from within their community. And in 2021, Dunn Street will continue to work with folks that want to share their stories, inspire others, give hope and organise communities for change. To find out how you can partner with Dunn Street, hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. And before we get into today's US podcast, if you've had to take time off work because of injury or illness, then you need a strong player on your team. Maurice Blackburn is Australia's #1 super claims law firm. They can check if you have insurance as part of your super and help you make a super TPD claim. Maurice Blackburn fights for fair. Call them on 1-800-111-222 or go to mauriceblackburn.com.au. That's mauriceblackburn.com.au. Be part of change and fight for fair. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast that dives into the progressive issues and campaigns of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And we go back overseas. Today we're joined by my good buddy, Sam Schneidman, who we haven't spoken to in a while, and it's 100 days since the Biden administration was elected, and we thought we'd get Sam on the pod to just give us a bit of an update on things, how they're tracking stateside. So that's today's episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. And if you're using Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and give us a review. And for all of the updates for the show, just follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. Okay, we're taping this one on a Tuesday morning in lockdown. No, wait, sorry. It's not lockdown Melbourne. Wow, that was a force of habit. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, we are in Melbourne though, and we're taping on a Tuesday morning. These things are true. And it's the hockey playoffs, the Stanley Cup, round one.
True.
Started last night. Bruins, Capitals, my team, the Bruins. And to help me break down...
Lost to my team.
Help me break down the first round is my good buddy, Sam Schneidman. Welcome to Social Democratic.
Thank you. Isn't it your favorite center-left podcast about all things sport?
It is. We aren't going to break down the Stanley Cup first round. But I did watch the game last night and I thought of you.
I'm disappointed Socially Democratic didn't have an episode about the Super League. I thought you for sure would have had something on that.
You know, I'd thought about it, but I'd already done a sports podcast with Richard Miles and I was like, I can't take a liberty with our loyal audience when they come here for politics chat and campaign chat, and then I start throwing sport all the time. They're going to be like, all right, Stephen, you're taking the piss now. I'm going, and I'm going to find something else to listen to. It's a very competitive industry out there, Sam, when it comes to podcasts.
It is. Indeed it is.
But I will indulge, if our audience will let us indulge just for one moment. You guys won last night's game in overtime. You had your goaltender going out early in the first period and a sort of a unknown, a guy who only played 4 or 5 games this season, do reasonably well against the Bruins' first line. I think that's a good result for the Caps, right? Yeah,
couldn't have been better. Winning the first game at home, went into OT, but won in the first 5 minutes of OT. With a very shorthanded roster, we have a lot of players out and injured. You can't ask for a better outcome. A win is a win, baby.
When you did get that goal in overtime, I felt that the way that the Caps celebrated that, I think you guys wanted it more.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that our team is so shorthanded right now, and the Bruins are a really solid club, that provided a lot of validation to and confidence for the team, I think, for the Caps.
Have you guys got home ice? I can't remember who's.
Yeah, we got home ice.
Yeah, okay.
We're the second seed.
Oh yeah, West 3 seed. Yeah, okay, cool. This is going to be a good series. This will go 7 for sure, I think.
I think it could go deep for sure. We'll see how tonight goes.
Yeah, indeed. It's a busy time right now because obviously the hockey playoffs are on. The basketball playoffs will start tonight with the Celtics taking on the Wizards. That's bizarre. Wow, 2 Boston teams playing
right?
two Washington teams.
Yeah.
That only just dawned on me.
Don't even talk to me about that. I have no idea.
Yeah, I know. And obviously we're 40 games deep into the baseball season, and the Red Sox are surprising everyone.
Yes, they are. I don't know. It'll be interesting because the Yankees are now coming back online.
Yeah.
Or they were, and then their whole team got COVID. So I don't know.
Yeah. More of that.
We'll see what happens. Once we're past the All-Star break, then we can talk about it again. See who's in first place.
Maybe we'll do a podcast then. Anyway, okay, we're here to talk about politics. It's been a while since you and I have spoke, and in the back of my mind, I said let's catch up with Sam after 100 days of the Biden administration. That milestone passed a week or so ago. So I thought we'd get you on and have a bit of a chat about how we think things have gone in the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. Before we jump into specifics, just your overall thoughts of how they've fared since Election Day.
Well, there's been so much that's happened since Election Day, obviously, not least of which was January 6th and the insurrection at the Capitol. And then there was the inauguration, which was positive and reaffirming for our democracy, which I think was not a thing that any American had ever seriously considered under threat until it was. And then we had sort of this massive rollout of vaccines, which has really helped to turn the tide of the pandemic in the United States and lift the collective spirits of our country. But all of that is to say that the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris, or everything that's happened since Election Day is only part of the story. You know, there's been all these other things that have sort of overshadowed the Biden-Harris administration getting off the ground. And I think in many ways, that's a key theme that they've been dealing with rather deftly, in my opinion, and have made it work to their advantage. It's less, things are less charged around the presidency than they were for the last 4 to 5 years. That's certainly the case.
I want to pick up on a bunch of things you just said there, but starting with, yes, the insurrection. I was watching NBC News yesterday lunchtime, and a number of the trials of the insurrectionists are happening at the moment. But I heard that there was a possibility that there would be a sort of 9/11 style committee being set up, and you might need to tell me out of what jurisdiction, if that's going to be set up. Is it the Justice?
It's in Congress.
It will be in Congress, right? And people like Kevin McCarthy would be subpoenaed to appear before this committee, which has got some of those folks worried, because even in the current trials that have been happening across the country, there's been inference of communication and links between the insurrectionists and Republican members of Congress. And if this was to then go into a 9/11 style committee with wide scoping exploratory powers, that some of these Republican congressmen or Congress people would be a little bit worried about the exposure that they would have in terms of how much coordination that they had with the insurrection.
Absolutely.
Let's just, for the sake of American democracy, let's just go after these pricks, show no mercy. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think what's really interesting, especially on this idea of the commission, for the folks who may not remember or don't know, the 9/11 Commission was put together as this bipartisan commission under the auspices of Congress as sort of a fact-finding expedition to determine how could such an event like 9/11 happen, and how do we prevent something like it from happening again. And it's held up as a huge success within American government because it was pursued in a very bipartisan manner. The people on the committee on the commission took real pains to try and keep it apolitical. It produced an exhaustive report that was published and is still looked at, as a case study in good governance. And it helped the country move on from that really sad period. What is obviously different here is that the 9/11 Commission was about an event that was initiated by people who were outside of America and very far away. It was very easy to otherize them. The incidents of January 6th were brought about by people who are very much Americans, and it's hard to cast them as people who are apart from us. The second thing that is different in a commission that would look into what happened on January 6th versus 9/11 is our whole media landscape has changed. Of course, social media did not exist in 2001. And we now find ourselves in not only this post-factual world, but a selective factual world where people are able to sort of build their own realities. And it'll be interesting to see, can not only this commission rise above whatever sort of dis and misinformation campaigns that are likely to surround it, but can it also break through and be accepted as fact by a majority of the country? And that's going to be, that's the $1 million question. And it's not something I'm especially optimistic about, especially when one group that's involved in the commission has such a vested interest in sort of obfuscating their own involvement in fomenting the events that transpired on that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be bipartisan like the 9/11 Commission was, but certainly folks like Liz Cheney, you'd expect them to, and even Mitch McConnell, I would hope, would give support to such an inquiry.
Well, the other thing is, what this commission does is it ensures that January 6th continues to be a real story in the news. And, I think the Republicans have shown themselves to be shrewd operators, and they will do anything to maximize their electoral success. And so it'll be interesting to see how they're able to maneuver that, because I can assure you this, I don't think that Mitch McConnell is going to do anything to help the January 6th Commission if that means it diminishes his chances at becoming the majority leader again.
That's a very good point you make there, and that goes to the point that James Carville was making, maybe a couple of weeks ago. It was like, just if the Democrats did this, the Republicans wouldn't let up for the next 10 years. Every time they go to the polls, they would smash the Democrats at every opportunity that they had an insurrection. Like if Antifa had, or the radical left had stormed the Capitol and carried on like the way that these nut jobs did, these Trumpers did for the Republican Party, that we would get crucified. And so, James Carville's view is the Democrats have to take the gloves off and absolutely crush the Republicans at every opportunity and remind middle-class folks in the suburbs of this is the party you want to vote for. This is the party of insurrection. This is the party that that hates democracy. Like, absolutely crush them. And in the back of my mind, I'm sort of thinking, and the natural moderate in me sort of thinks, no, we need to heal the nation. You need to bring people back together again. But there also has to be accountability. And people have to be held to account, not just the morons that actually stormed the damn building, but also the people that let them in the front door as well. And that includes a whole bunch of congressmen that need to get locked up. How ironic. Yeah. Lock them up is my chant that I am going to, We've now just got the episode's subject title. Lock them up.
Yeah.
Like, unbelievable. Don't let these people get away with this. This is outrageous.
Yeah, it's totally outrageous. I mean, it's hard to like. What do you say about what happened that day? Because I mean, everyone could see it, right? It's all there for everyone to see, and I think we've just become so inured, at least in the United States, to this ridiculous spectacle that our politics has become, but also the warp speed news cycle that everything is filtered through now. And so I think that there is a skepticism out there that there will be a reckoning and serious accountability for what happened.
We are going to talk about Biden in a moment, but while we're on the Republican Party, obviously the most recent news last week was Liz Cheney, who's a senior high-ranking Republican in Congress, got rolled for her position within the conference. She was
she's the third highest-ranking member of the Republicans in the House.
Yeah.
So there's the majority leader, that's Kevin McCarthy. Then there's the minority leader, that's Kevin McCarthy. Then there's the minority whip, Steve Scalise. And his job is basically to like round up votes for bills and various things. And then there's the conference chair. That was Liz Cheney, and her role is to be sort of the chief messenger for congressional Republicans. And so when your chief messenger is coming out and continually talking about how deplorable January 6th was and how it was the direct result of Donald Trump and the party needs to move on from Trump, it's kind of tough to, that does present an untenable situation for congressional Republicans.
So just watching the Republican side right now, I mean, you don't want to be them. And I know that I was thinking about this yesterday. Because Trump won in 2016, I think a lot of us on the left who never thought he would win are now shell-shocked by that moment in time. And there is almost a bogey in the back of our minds that, Trump is... We'd never want to underestimate Trump again. Because we did it once and look what happened. And it wasn't just winning an election, it was then 4 years that just completely turned the country upside down, and we don't want to go back to that. So none of us we all think that Trump, if he was to run again in 2024, that he would win. And we all thought he was going to win in 2020. But if you're the Republican Party right now, I wouldn't want to be the Republican Party right now because they are heavily divided. And the fact that what they've just done to Liz Cheney, who is an open conservative Republican. She's not even a moderate Republican. She's a conservative Republican. And she's being rolled by basically, the Trump people or the people who have pledged loyalty and fealty to Donald Trump. They're rolling her. Like, that's a problem for the Republican Party, like, let alone when they're a moderate. Like, I don't want to be the Republican Party right now. And here's the other thing I want to leave with you. And this is to the point that we as on the left need to remind ourselves, and this isn't a cocky statement. This is a statement of fact. Yes, Donald Trump won the 2016 US presidential election. But from that moment on, he lost every other election. He lost control of the House in the midterms in 2018, and then he lost control of the Senate and the White House in 2020. So things haven't really been all that great under Donald Trump for the Republicans.
But on the flip side of that, the Republicans probably look at the 2020 election and say, okay, Donald Trump lost, but if you look at it, the difference, though, in the popular vote, it was about 7 million votes between Trump and Joe Biden. When you look at the electoral map and you remember that there are 270 electoral votes that are needed to win, the states that sort of comprise the margin of electoral map victory were decided by a collective 40,000 votes. So if there were 40,000 votes difference in, a few states like Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. On top of that, the Republican Party, I think, was encouraged by the outcome of 2020. They went into it with a presidential candidate at the top of the ticket who was historically unpopular, but they actually did way better than expected in the congressional races, actually narrowing the gap between Democrats and Republicans in the House to just a handful of seats, and almost hanging on to their majority in the Senate and managing to fight it all the way to a 50-50 split. The other thing is that they absolutely cleaned up on the state level. So they control a ton of state legislatures, which is really important because the United States is going through this once every 10-year period around redistricting based on the census that was completed in 2020, which allows for the drawing of congressional maps and districts. And then on top of all of that, you've got the fact that there are all these laws that are being passed at the state level to restrict voting rights and heavily tilt the electoral playing field from sort of a process standpoint. And then on top of even that, there is a dedicated propaganda outlet for the Republican Party called Fox News and things like Newsmax and OAN, like straight up propaganda, misinformation, like crazy shit coming out of Tucker Carlson every night. And then there's like talk radio. So I don't think that the Republicans are playing with that diminished of a hand, if I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and look, you make I knew you were going to come up with the bloody 40,000 vote figure. But I will say this, that every election in Western liberal democracies in this COVID era, the incumbent has won. Whether it be at a state level here in Australia, national elections that we just saw in Britain, in Europe, in New Zealand. The only guy that couldn't hold on was Donald Trump. Like, everyone around the world right now is voting for security. They're voting, and no one is taking a risk on the other guy. Pardon my gendered language. But no one is taking a risk on the other candidate. They are sticking with who they know, regardless of how shit they are. America didn't. That's how bad Donald Trump was. And not only that,
I think that speaks to Joe Biden, how much of a not a risk he is. He was a known entity to a lot of people, and I think went into this with, the electorate was very comfortable with someone like Joe Biden standing in as a foil to Donald Trump.
That is absolutely true, and we'll come to Joe in a moment. And the other point is, you lost. He lost the Senate in Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, that was a direct result of Donald Trump.
Yeah. And not only did he lose it, he lost it twice because there were two simultaneous elections happening at the same time with two different candidates, and he lost both of them. Like, if I was a Republican Party, I'd be having a good hard look at myself saying, we are stuffed right now and we need to sort this out. And it's only going to get worse because you got this moron down in Mar-a-Lago running the Republican Party from the golf course and weekend cocktail parties. And meanwhile, the rest of the moderates are up in Washington racking their brain going, where do we go from here? Because we've got midterms to get ready for in less than 18 months. And, I would expect, look, and we'll talk about Joe Biden in a moment, but if he keeps doing a good job, I think that the Democrats can make gains in the House. And hopefully maybe even, I haven't actually looked at the Senate and who's up this time, but hopefully hold on to what they've got in the Senate.
It's going to be tough, no question. But there's 2022 is not going to be, is not the same dynamic as 2010. Let's put it that way, when the Democrats just absolutely got decimated in the first midterm after Obama got elected.
What are your thoughts about what does 2022 look like from this far out?
Well, I think, a lot is still to transpire between now and then, but historically speaking, the first midterm after a presidential election that results in a change of party. So if the president was a Republican and becomes a Democrat, or a Democrat becomes a Republican, usually the pattern holds that it's really bad for the president's party in the first election after that. And, I think a case, the Democrats got cleaned out in 2010. Trump lost control of the House in 2018. There is a thought that the Democrats are at a disadvantage, of course, heading into 2022, if you just look at the patterns of history and sort of the map. However, there is a reason to sort of be optimistic that the Democrats can mitigate the damage. And so, just looking at the map, in terms of the seats that are contested in the House, only 3% of the 222-seat Democratic majority are in districts that Trump won in 2020, compared to 20% in 2010 that Obama won, or McCain won. So the Democrats are fighting to hold on to stuff in areas where they performed well last time. It's also going to be interesting, how does the pandemic fit into all of this? So Republicans failed at a national level to contain the pandemic and have been largely opposed to its solutions, especially on that $1.9 trillion relief bill. So are Democrats able to make hay out of that? And then, of course, what crises come up between now and then, and what is Biden able to accomplish? I think Biden's messaging and policy, the political framing around his policies, have been shrewdly cast as things to help sort of like the working and middle class and bread and butter American issues of taking care of like American jobs and American families. So we'll see how much mileage he's able to get out of that.
It's 2022, November 2022 is going to be interesting because it's in the back of our minds here, certainly in the southern part of the continent, because the Victorian election will be held in the last Saturday in November. And obviously the midterms will be held on the first Tuesday in November 2022. What does the world look like by then? What does the world think about COVID by then? By looks of most of America will be fully vaccinated. Maybe most of America will have returned to some level of normalcy. I'm sure that structurally things will have changed. People will be still working from home a lot and all that kind of stuff. But by and large, stadiums will be full, shopping malls will be full, people are going about their lives, you've had a wonderful summer, all that kind of stuff. So maybe COVID will now feel like a distant memory. And will
totally,
and so the question I'm thinking about for both Biden and for Daniel Andrews is, when people go to the polls, are they still voting like people are voting right now? That is, they are voting for security. They are voting for, they don't want to risk change. Are they prepared when they come to the midterms and come to the Victorian state election? Are they prepared to maybe now start to look at the other candidate? Or will it be still at that stage, we're still, like, there's a long tail in this sort of COVID experience that we've all had? I mean, I don't know what it's going to be.
Who knows? But I think, the dynamic that we know for certain is going to be there is there's going to be two things that are playing out. Like, one is resentment from sort of the heavy hand of the government coming in, closing businesses, shutting things down. I think people will still be very frustrated and angry about that and be looking to sort of respond in some way politically. And then hopefully things, at least economically, are coming back to life and we're experiencing a bit of a boom. So are people sort of rewarding the politicians for being able to help bring that about? And do they want to keep the good times going? It'll be really interesting to see.
The handling of COVID has been the best compare and contrast between the two presidencies. The way,
you can
just
yeah.
Like, I mean, if we were to go back and listen to some of the episodes that you and I did in the middle of the pandemic, like it was just, I mean, I was respectfully trying to ask questions and saying, what is going on in America right now? Like the way that you've just...
That'd be like, good question. I had no fucking clue.
Yeah,
this is
right?
insane.
But now, watching the administration and American ingenuity and entrepreneurialism and just sort of this can-do spirit of getting a large population vaccinated has been incredible. Like, it has been truly incredible.
Yeah, but it's just too bad we weren't able to use bleach to kill COVID, or like, the Tide Pod challenge wasn't able to wipe out COVID.
There's still time, Sam. There's still time.
Well, I'm vaccinated, so I don't need. Thankfully, I don't need to try those therapies. But yeah, that would have been.
Well, I mean,
great.
Okay, so here in Australia, and the opposite is happening. So because during COVID, Australia did a very good job of dealing with the outbreak of the virus.
Yeah.
What we are not doing no credit goes to Scott Morrison in any way, shape or form. It all has to go to the Premier.
Scotty from marketing.
All has to go to the premiers for doing all of the heavy lifting in that response. However, we're now looking at our vaccination rollout, and it's shocking. Like, it's embarrassing how badly handled and botched this has, and the implications that it has on our economy. We can't open up our country. We can't let people in. There are 35,000 Australians that may want to come home. They've got an Australian passport that says you can come home. They can't come home, this will have a long-lasting impact on the Australian economy because he can't freaking do a rollout of a vaccination, whereas in the United States you have. So what is, like, you're vaccinated. I don't think you'd be in the highest category, right? But you're vaccinated. What was your experience? Like, where did you go get vaccinated? How did this all work?
Well, it's just interesting taking out the politics of Trump and Republicans and Biden and Democrats from the vaccines for a moment. I think heading into the vaccines, I think there was some concern among Americans, like, how good are we still at being able to do sort of these big logistical challenges? I mean, not only was there sort of the miracle of the science, the most effective vaccines are the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, which are powered by a new technology called mRNA that had been in development for at least 17 to 20 years or so. And this is the first time ever that it's been used successfully in a vaccine. And so there's this like the miracle of the scientific breakthrough, coupled with, okay, well, we weren't able to contain and control the spread of the virus. Masks were such a political issue and culture war issue. And we are dealing with this misinformation pandemic as well in the United States. Are people going to trust and want to get the vaccines? And so I think that was something that a lot of people were skeptical and nervous about. Like, could we still do this? And what was interesting is, like, we have heard, like, obviously sort of the mythologies around going to the moon, winning World War II, the Marshall Plan, all that sort of stuff. And I think we were looking to see, is that capacity still there? So that was the context, I think, or the frame of mind that a lot of people went into this with. And the vaccines were approved shortly after the election. I think maybe even the week after the winner was announced.
Yeah, Trump thought it was a conspiracy.
Yeah, totally. And they were sort of rolled out. There were 20 million shots, I think, given out by the time inauguration rolled around, and then we were massively able to accelerate it. And just here in New York, it was pretty painless, honestly. had to sign up, was able to get one. I live in Clinton Hill in Brooklyn and ended up having to go to the Bronx to get it, which was like about an hour away. And that was just because that's where the system kind of slotted me. And I was happy to do that. I waited in line for like maybe an hour and a half, but it was really well done. We're in line. It was at a public high school in the cafeteria, and you walk in, you roll up your sleeve. Everyone's really pumped and stoked to be doing it. People are taking selfies. You get jabbed. You wait for 15 minutes in a special area, and then you go on your way. And everyone I know has had sort of like this relatively seamless experience getting it. So I think, that anxiety that we had, that are we still capable of doing big, hard things, has been alleviated. We are still able to do that. I think where we are right now is everyone who has wanted to get a vaccine has gotten a vaccine, more or less. And are we going to be able to vaccinate our kids? And are we going to be able to convince the vaccine hesitant and skeptics to get it? Which obviously has big implications on the variants and how long this virus sticks around and how effective the vaccines remain over time. But yes, it was a big victory, at least for our collective confidence here in the United States.
What are the other things out of the first 100 days that stands out for you that the Biden administration has done effectively? The rescue plan. I mean, those stimulus check payments, it seemed it took forever to try and get that. I mean, he was trying to negotiate that stuff through Congress, and in the end kind of just went alone on it. It feels to me that there are lessons learned from the first 2 years of the Obama administration, in which, if we recall, Obama went into that election talking about it's not red states and blue states, it's the United States. So I'm going to extend the hand of friendship across the aisle and, bipartisanship and all that kind of stuff, and did that, and then got basically bashed to death by the Tea Party within the Republican Party. And, it was just, they just burned 2 years of having control of the House, and also, remind me, am I correct? It was a filibuster protected
proof
Senate,
yes.
Right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And you look back in those days, what could you do if you had that now? So I feel like Biden's kind of learnt that lesson and said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. If you're not with me, well, I'm just going to do it anyway. But if you want to get on the train of, progress, then please come with me. What are the things you think that Biden has nailed in the first 100 days when it comes to legislative or policy settings?
Well, there's no question that Biden has brought competency and stability back to the presidency and the government, and there's more sort of predictability for what the government is doing. I would say that Biden has sort of like perfectly encapsulated the adage of under-promising and over-delivering, especially when it comes to the vaccines. So, he said, I want to get 100 million shots in the first 100 days, which sounds like a big deal, and it is, but we were sort of like on pace to do that when he was inaugurated, just if we kept up the million shots that we had reached. And what he did was he was able to sort of set goals, establish the competency of his administration, and then he was able to beat those goals. And that, I think, has helped give his presidency footing, certainly in Congress, but also in the media, as an administration that's able to handle things effectively and competently and with stability. The other thing is that he's shown that he's willing to do what it takes to get his priorities through Congress when he wants to. So some insider baseball for you. The first big thing that Joe Biden did was pass a $1.9 trillion stimulus deal, which is like, that's a fake number as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's like that number in Austin Powers, you know, when Dr. Evil is now in the future and he's still making demands for what it was in the 60s, $1 million, and the US guys laugh.
Yeah.
It's the flip of that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's absurd. Well, anyway, so he gets that passed, but there's the filibuster in the Senate, which means that 60 senators have to agree to vote on a bill if it's going to be passed. And only then can it be passed on a simple majority. So it's this crazy thing where you have to reach 60 votes to have a vote on something with 50 votes making it pass. It's crazy. 51 votes. Anyway, 10 Republican senators were not going to do that. So he used this parliamentary procedure that we have called budget reconciliation, which means that for certain bills that impact the spending and the budgeting of the government, you don't need to go through normal procedure of getting the 60 votes threshold before you can have the majority vote. You can just go straight to the majority vote. So that's what they did. Now, you can only do that for things that like impact spending. You can't do that for things like gun control or voting rights or the minimum wage, it turns out, which is why he hasn't done that. And so he made a show of trying to come up with a bipartisan compromise. They weren't able to do that, and they passed the bill. So he's shown that he's willing to do that if that's what it takes. And I think we'll see that same dynamic play out on this rather large infrastructure bill that is being discussed right now as well. So that's what I would say are the key takeaways of the first 100 days.
I feel like he's getting a good balance as well of keeping the broad church that is the Democratic Party together. I think that he's doing all of the good things that middle America want to see and moderate, I guess, middle class and working class voters really care about or get their heads around, which is stimulus package, the families plan, the response to COVID, investing in that. But he's also doing important stuff that I guess the party elites, the more engaged folks living on the coasts in LA and New York, which, recommitting to...
What are you trying to say?
Yeah, people like you. No, joking. Recommitting to the Paris Accord, pausing the construction on the border wall, reversing the Muslim travel ban and the anti-trans military bill, disbanding the 1776 Commission, lol. It's sort of... everyone's kind of... I feel like everyone's kind of reasonably happy. Like, I don't see AOC and that gang kind of cracking the shits too much. Maybe a little bit recently, they've sort of got a bit antsy in the pantsy about some foreign policy stuff, but by and large on the domestic stuff, everyone's reasonably happy.
Yeah, so I think a big factor in this is the vaccines and the country turning the tide on COVID, right? That will, it turns out, lift a lot of spirits and moods when you're able to sort of bend the curve on a invisible killer respiratory virus. So, like, how to evaluate the first 100 days? I think the vaccine rollout is obviously a success. The poverty fighting portions of the spending bill are broadly popular. One thing that's interesting is, so in that $1.9 trillion stimulus bill was this thing called the child tax credit, which means that basically most families that have children will receive a direct cash payment from the government of $250 every single month for every child. It's a huge deal because not only is it a significant expansion of the social safety net, which is a hard-won game in the U.S., but it also covers over 80% of the children in the United States, and by some estimates will cut childhood poverty in half. So that starts, I think, in July, those payments, or maybe they'll start next month. Anyway, they're coming soon, and people will start to notice that. And $250 per child per month is a lot. And the United States has, only recently started embracing direct cash payments. And so that'll be interesting. And there's a couple of other things that are potential successes for Biden as well. So one thing that is being discussed is a bipartisan police reform bill. And it's not going to abolish the police, and it's not going to defund the police either, but it might get wins on things like qualified immunity and other aspects related to like weapons transfers from the Pentagon to local police departments, which again is insane. And then there's sort of this infrastructure bill that could get passed. If that gets passed, that's another huge stimulus to the economy and produces a lot of sort of like working class jobs. And there is potential voting rights legislation. Less optimistic that will get passed in the next year or so. But those are three big things that are very much in play. So if he can build off the successes that he has already on the books, especially with those three other policy wins, I think you're going to see just a continuation of people being broadly satisfied with the way that his administration is going so far.
His job approval rating at the moment, which was on the 358 website, is 53%. Which is...
So that's kind of interesting because that is good, I guess, if you're president. You want to be above 50%, But the other thing is that's low historically compared to presidents in their first 100 days. In fact, I do believe that's the second lowest presidential approval rating in the first 100 days, with the exception of Donald Trump, for any president, I think in the last 50 years or something. For me, what that tells me is not that Joe Biden is hated by half the country, but that this country is very polarized, and it's hard for him to get, 60% of the country on board with being down with what he's doing.
Yeah, I think you're on the money. He's 13% better than Trump was after his first 100 days, and he's 7% less than Obama was after his first 100 days. And I think you're right. The country is so polarized. And, it's going to take some time, I think, who knows, maybe never, but I'd like to think that he will melt the hearts of some hardened Republicans that had basically drank the Kool-Aid and bought the Trump bullshit over the last 4 years and are starting to come back to being a little bit more moderate and level-headed. I saw a poll during the week that said that 33% of Republican voters acknowledged that Biden won the election, which is up from where it was at election time. So there are...
Hey.
I know. That's... Yeah, that says a lot that we're excited by that fact. But, it is showing that some Republicans are starting to come out of their winter insanity and realise that, up is up and down is down. The infrastructure stuff I'm very excited about. I think it's such good social democratic policy, and I really hope that he has success with that. The voting rights stuff is interesting because you talked about it earlier in the program, which was the what's happening at a state legislative level, particularly we're seeing in Georgia, and it's going to get. I guess this is going to be almost like a
Georgia, Arizona, Texas, everywhere.
Yeah, undoing and making it harder for folks, particularly people of color, to get to the polls and vote. So they're just trying to lock in.
Florida.
Oh, yeah. So the voting rights stuff's important. But, I mean, as you said, like that's going to require 60 votes in the Senate. I can't think of any other way that they can get around that. So I don't hold out much hope for it, but it is so important.
Well, if there's one glimmer of hope, it's that this week Joe Manchin, who is, a linchpin to a lot of this stuff in the Senate as a very conservative member of the Democratic Party, who is supposedly devoutly committed to bipartisanship, came out with his own voting rights plan that I think was well received on the Democratic side. And so we'll see, is he committed to getting it through? Well, can he get 9 Democrat or 10 Republicans on board? We'll see.
No, he can't.
I mean,
it's just not going to happen.
I don't.
But
yeah, I don't
look,
think so.
Look, I get where Manchin's coming from. He's a West Virginia senator. This isn't Democratic heartland. He's trying to hold on to his seat. I think it's good that he's come up with a plan because I want him to take that plan to the Republicans, and I want him to watch the Republicans laugh in his face and piss him around for 6 months, and then for him to get angry and then go, you know what, this filibuster's stupid. Let's just get rid of it. Where are you on the filibuster? You and I had an argument one day catching a tram ride back to head office about the filibuster. And I was...
Did we?
Yeah, we did. I was of the view that the filibuster's stupid and you should get rid of it. And I still am of this view. Where are you right now on this?
I'm 100% of that view. It's so stupid.
When did you change your mind?
Well, I don't ever remember being of an opposite mind on that. I think, look, as you sort of acquire lived experience, especially over the last 10 years, and you see sort of how sclerotic American government has become, you start to wonder about its effectiveness and whether not only is the Senate an institution that is representative of the country, spoiler alert, it's not, but also is it capable of producing outcomes that improve the lives of the people in the United States. And that is, obviously increasingly in doubt. So I think a key aspect of this is the filibuster, and it's being used, weaponized to hold up a lot of things that could improve life in the United States.
If you are a senator standing up in the Senate and you're filibustering and you're just sitting there reading the phone book, if there happened to be an insurrection at that same time and people came running into the chamber and then you had to run out, does your speech therefore end? Can you break the filibuster with an insurrection?
Good question. I don't
just
know.
asking for a friend.
Maybe I'll get back to you on that. I'll put that in the back of my mind and see.
Solutions oriented. That's what we want to be here. Okay. The other one is the minimum wage.
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, I think that's a perfect example of not only how the Senate is unrepresentative of the country. Just look at how many people work for minimum wage in this country and what the average net worth of a senator is. Every senator is worth several $1 million at least, I think. And they're just not in touch with the needs of the vast majority of people in this country. And the filibuster insulates them from those needs because they don't have to come out and take a stand on these tough issues. They can just send an email to the clerk of the Senate saying that they filibuster something like an increase in the minimum wage, and therefore it doesn't get through. So that is a perfect example of an issue that has been bogged down because of the presence of the filibuster, which, for the listeners, is this relic of the Jim Crow era, because the filibuster was used to hold up the progress of civil rights and voting rights for blacks in the Reconstruction era after the Civil War.
Why not test the filibuster and get those senators to come up? Get 10 brave Republican senators who constantly try to pitch themselves as the party of the working man. And
that's been thrown out, like a filibuster reform. Like, so the way that it works now is you only have to send like an email down to like the clerk of the Senate saying like, I filibuster, and then there it is.
So you don't actually need to actually physically go into the chamber and then stand on your feet for 60 hours?
No.
Oh, that is pathetic.
It's pathetic, yeah. And so like there is a movement to say, okay, what if we keep this filibuster, but you actually have to like talk now or something? And I think Joe Manchin has come out and said, yeah, I don't support changes to the filibuster in any way.
Oh, Joe.
Yeah.
Come on,
yeah,
Joe.
It's not great. Yeah.
All right. Last question. I had John McKinnon.
It's the last one. You better make it good.
Oh, that'll be a good one. I had John McKinnon on last week. We were talking about the Scottish.
I saw that.
Talking about the Scottish elections, but then broadly speaking about the UK elections. And towards the end, we were speaking about an opinion piece that was written by Tony Blair in the New Statesman, where he was making the argument that the Labor Party in Britain anyway needs to completely deconstruct itself and then reconstruct itself because it's not suited for the times as a social democratic party. And he was talking about trying to get a balance between the radical ideas of the left, the radical left, and the moderate pragmatism of the centre left or moderates, and how to get that balance right. And John sort of went into a bit of a monologue about it, and then started talking about how we don't look. A lot of voters, not all voters, but a lot of voters don't look at politics anymore through the prism of left and right, or centre left and centre right, or hard left and hard right. People who are completely engaged in the political process most certainly do, because they understand what their values are, and then they pick a party that reflects those values. He then went on to talk about people right now are just attracted to Boris Johnson because he is Boris Johnson. And that's why we're seeing swings to the Conservative Party in traditional Labor heartlands in the north of England. That's why we're seeing swings to the SNP, the Scottish National Party, in Labor heartland in the industrial belt, the central belt of Scotland, so around Glasgow and Edinburgh. People aren't voting for those parties, they're voting for those leaders because they like those leaders. And what I thought about that a lot during the week. And I thought about, and here comes the sports analogy. Younger people, like I'm a Boston sports fan. I love my Red Sox. I love my Bruins. I love my Pats, and I love my C's, right? And I'm a Celtic football fan, and I will follow those clubs till the day they die. However, the younger generation today, they're not a Celtics fan. They're not a Lakers fan. They're a LeBron fan, and they go wherever LeBron goes. There are certain players and individuals they like. They follow the player. They don't follow the team anymore.
Now you sound like a boomer sports radio crank who's like complaining about the new generation of fans.
Well, I'm a
Gen Xer.
I'm a Gen
sports radio crank.
Thank you, exactly. Yeah, we're the lost generation that everyone ignores. So maybe that's what's happening in politics. As John was saying this, I was thinking this in my head, going, "Oh my God, it's not just happening in sports; it's happening in politics as well."
Well, I think it's not necessarily that people are attracted to particular leaders as much as celebrity has become more of a defining aspect of our politics. So I think a great example of this is that here in the New York mayoral race, Andrew Yang has been sort of the undisputed frontrunner from the very beginning by a wide margin because he acquired so much name recognition from running for president. Donald Trump, I think, was the paragon of this this new like paradigm, right? Where like he had acquired so much fame and channeled like all these emotional strains that run through our politics in the United States that he was able to capitalize on that. So I think that that's becoming more of a defining aspect of our politics is the celebrity aspect. I think beyond that, another way that the traditional battle lines of politics are being recast is, you're right, it's less about sort of like these traditional conservative and liberal ideas or like left and right abstractions. And it's becoming more defined along class lines, especially as economic inequality becomes more accelerated in a lot of Western democracies. And so that is something that we're beginning to see a lot of as well. It helps to understand, okay, Donald Trump is this I'm not going to pronounce the word right. Megalomaniac.
Yeah.
Yes. Billionaire.
Allegedly.
Yet, what's that?
He's allegedly a billionaire. We're not entirely sure.
Allegedly, yeah. Well, he's just like out of his mind billionaire, but all of these sort of like down and out working class people liked him because he was able to tap it. He's using his celebrity to tap into the anxieties and resentments that particular cohort sort of feels. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see play out here over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think that the interesting thing I do find about it is that whilst I do agree, I agree with John's theory, and I largely agreed with the sentiments in the Blair piece. There are examples of good social democratic government and policy, and I think that at a state level here in Australia, we've seen that done quite well. Not just here in Victoria, but right across the country. There's success in WA, Queensland, our territories, and Victoria. And I think the Biden administration is also doing it as well. They've got that good mix of strong policy positions that are going to impact on the everyday lives of working people, whether they be middle class or working class.
100%. I mean, like that child tax credit is a great example of it.
Yeah. And I think that what Boris Johnson has been doing, whether you like him or not, he's charismatic, but he's also, some of the policies that they've been doing have been policies of the centre left. Some of the policies of Scott Morrison, like the Morrison budget they just delivered just recently is a centre left budget. Like, they are spending like drunken sailors right now. And it must be breaking their hearts to do it. But I think they're kind of getting comfortable with the idea because, they're probably going to get re-elected in, 6 months' time or whatever. So I think what we're seeing from the right is the right are happy to just pick parts about policy settings that may be left or right, but they're just doing it to whatever to ensure they can have electoral success. I think Donald Trump was trying to do that as well. But I think he just kind of stuffed up the COVID response, mainly because he's an idiot. But I think that you can get that balance. And social democrats, we have to do the same thing as well. I think we have to pick and choose the bits of policies that aren't necessarily just always what we'd call left-wing policy, right? And not get suckered into, I think it's good. Like, I think the end of John's thesis was that we need to take the ideas, the policy, the diversity of our movement makes us stronger. So we may think that, AOC and their ideas are crazy, and we may think that, that Biden and Manchin are old, moderate bores. But when you combine those ideas, those policy ideas, and when you combine how the solutions about how you're going to enact them, then it actually makes your movement stronger. And I think that's kind of where we need to be heading. as social democrats for us to have success.
Well, I think that's certainly where it's the course that the Biden administration has charted for sure.
Samuel, lovely to see you again.
Always a pleasure, Stephen.
And the New York primaries for the mayoral race are coming up in mid to late June. Maybe we'll get you back on then and have a bit of a chat.
I love it. It's always a good time. And there will be lots to discuss between now and then.
There will indeed. Well, you take care of yourself with your that vaccine you've got, and
thank you. I'm gonna flex it for sure. The party scene in New York has been pretty good. So for all the people down there in Australia waiting for your vaccines, just hold on a little longer. It'll be very fun once you get them.
I'm getting all the vaccines. I'm going to try and get my ticket stamped for all of them so I can get the whole package.
Yes.
All right. Cheers, mate.
You should. Cheers. Bye-bye.